Hi, welcome to the NBA show. My name is Morten Jensen, and today we'll be talking about some of the guys who could enter the 2021 NBA draft, so stay tuned. First and foremost, we gotta go to the very top of the draft board where we have a guy named Cunningham from Oklahoma State University. This guy is being compared to Luka Doncic, Paul Pierce. Now, personally, I'm not into the player comp per se. I think it can be a beneficial tool to sort of gauge what type of player you're talking about, but every player is his own guy, and I think that's really important to remember. But Cunningham is 6'7". He's a big guard slash wing who can handle the basketball, who can initiate plays. He didn't have a whole lot of weapons alongside him during his season here in Oklahoma State, so he's been doing a lot of it himself. That's why his assist numbers aren't really that huge. I think they're around 4 per game, maybe a little bit under. He's a good rebounder. He can get into the transition off the defensive boards. He can really get into a sort of passing game and slashing game for him, and he should be the number one guy picked if he declares for the 2021 NBA draft. I know a lot of teams are hell-bent on if they get number one pick, that's their guy. The interest in Cunningham also underlines how NBA teams have changed. They now prefer to have playmaking from some of their bigger players, not necessarily the traditional point guard. Cunningham is not going to be a guy who is limited to one position. He can possibly play 1, 2, and 3. Even in the pinch, you could put him at the 4. There are so many moving parts when it comes to roster construction, but Cunningham being able to fill so many different slots is just a huge premium. We're talking about a guy who can change the course of your franchise. He's just that good. Now, statistically, we're not looking at some sort of Michael Jordan here. He's at roughly 18.5 points, 6 rebounds. And most people will look at that and go, is that worthy of the number one pick? You don't really need to concern yourself with the stats in this scenario. It doesn't really matter. It's his influence on the court. It's when you watch him play, his smarts, the way that he's shooting the ball, the way he creates separation, the way he thinks the game out. He is one of those high IQ guys in the same vein as Luka Doncic, Paul Pierce, Nikola Jokic, that type of guy, right? So it is very probable that he's going to succeed and become a star at the next level. At least it does appear that way. So for now, Cunningham sits at top of the 2021 mock draft if we were picking today. And of course, we're not. There's a whole lot of time left. We don't even know when the draft is scheduled because of the pandemic. We'll see, but it would take quite a leap for someone else to overtake Cunningham's position as the number one guy this year. Next up is Evan Mobley out of USC. He's a 7-footer. He's sort of slim, but that doesn't really matter because he's got time to bulk up. And honestly, the fact that he's not 270 pounds, that's attached to his 6'11", 7-foot frame, it actually works as an asset for him. He's very mobile, very agile. There is some reminiscent in his body movement, very similar to Chris Bosh and Tyson Chandler in the fact that they can cover so much ground very quickly because they are not carrying that a whole lot of weight. And Mobley is the same. He projects as a high-end defensive player at the big position, but he can also shoot, he can pass. Eventually, maybe there is a chance that the offense can flow through him as the number one option. There's just a lot of flexibility with him when he comes into the NBA. He hasn't really shot the ball from the outside a whole lot at USC, and I have to imagine that changes when he hits the NBA. He's got a high release point on his jump shot, very similar to Kevin Durant in that sense. And given his size, he will be able to get that shot off against most players, even at the NBA level right now. Mobley is a project, but not one of those raw projects. He'll come in and there will be a certain baseline in terms of his production, but he is the type of guy who will be substantially better 3 and 4 years into his career. So we got that going for ourselves in terms of looking forward to a guy who can really change how we're looking at bigs over the next coming years, because he can do everything. There is so much to his game. He's super intriguing. If there was a guy in this draft that could challenge Cunningham for the number one, it's Evan Mobley. Personally, I don't think he's there yet. I don't think he will get there, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Mobley in his own right could be absolutely huge to the right team because he's also smart. He's got great ball skills. Mobley is averaging roughly 16.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 3 blocks. So the numbers are there efficiency-wise, especially from the outside. He's got some way to go. But again, that's going to just change when he hits the NBA. The court is going to be widened up a little bit more. He's going to be playing with better teammates who are going to get him more open shots. So there is a scenario here wherein Mobley comes into the NBA and is effective right off the bat. So as my number 3 guy, I have Jalen Suggs out of Gonzaga. You could argue that Jonathan Guminga, who's currently playing in the G League Unite system, could overtake him as the 3rd most intriguing prospect. There's still time left for that to develop. Right now, I personally have Suggs. He's a 6'4" combo guard who plays primarily the one in Gonzaga at the NBA level. I'm not really sure he's like a clear-cut point guard. We're talking about 14 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. Like, his numbers won't blow you away, but in part that's because he's playing on just a loaded Gonzaga team. I mean, they have Corey Kispert and their team is the number 1 in the nation. It's just those numbers are just not going to go to him, a freshman who is loaded in terms of talent around him. He won't have all those great stats like a Cade Cunningham or someone else in this draft. He is a little bit lower on the tier level, but he is super intriguing still. He's highly athletic. He can get into the teeth of the defense. He's very, very aggressive. He's got a developing 3-point shot. He can find guys off the rolls when he goes into pick and roll scenarios. He can find guys who pops. He'll find guys when he drives. Now, there is a lot of potential in Suggs as one of those do-it-all off guards, maybe even point guards if he develops the right way in the NBA, to be a guy who just stuffs the box score every single night. Suggs is also highly intelligent. Again, we're seeing a theme here. It's about guys who think the game out. The top 3 guys so far that I have on my list are really, really intelligent ball players, and Suggs just has the added benefit of being a freak athlete. So there's a lot of potential there. I think there are a lot of teams who couldn't use a secondary playmaker, and he would fit right into that role. And if he develops into a primary ball handler, you can cross that bridge when you get there. If he's on the board at 3, you at least have to give him a strong look. So now we go to number 4, but I'm actually going to mesh that and merge that with number 5 as well, because that's the G League Unite team, primarily consisting of Jonathan Guminga and Jalen Green. I think it's so early. They started late here in the season getting actual playing time. I think it's really early to try to figure out who of those two are going to be better than one another. So I'm actually lumping in number 4 and number 5 here because they're very interchangeable in that regard. Guminga is 6'8". He's a wing. He's got ball handling. He's been able to make a lot of passes that could transfer into the NBA level. So if he becomes a playmaking 3-man who can also slide up to the 4, we're looking at a guy who has a lot of versatile potential and would be one of those premium players that every single team looks for when they're filling out their roster. You always want a guy who can handle the basketball, especially when you have the size that he does. He's also very fluent in his movements. He's athletic. He'll get to the cup. The shooting is still not where it needs to be, and we have to see if that becomes a thing. Ultimately, it doesn't really terrify me that he's not a good shooter yet. I think shooting is one of those things that you can learn when you get to the higher level. It's about repetition. It's about having a proper shooting coach. It's basically about training and putting in the hours. So I'm not too concerned about his shooting woes coming in. I'm way more intrigued about defensive upside, ball handling, and the way that he can break down a defense off the dribble at 6'8". There should be a lot of teams interested in his caliber of play. As for Jalen Green, he's one of those highly explosive guards, a little bit reminiscent of Zach LaVine in the sense that he can shoot the 3-ball and he can sky over everyone. He can really get into the paint and finish over larger players because of that athleticism. In terms of basketball IQ, I haven't seen enough of him to really comment on that yet. I think there is some intriguing playmaking capabilities of him moving forward in terms of him reading the floor, but he's also super young at just 19. And much like with Guminga, he hasn't played a whole lot with the Ignite, so there's time still to see what he can become in terms of a playmaker and a team-oriented guy. Offensively, though, I think he's got the higher ground between him and Guminga currently. He's just more polished. There's more offensive upside right now. He's a guy you could project to be a 20-point scorer in the NBA in a couple of years. That wouldn't shock me at all. He has great separation off the bounce. He can spot up. He can get to the cup by himself off his own ball handling. You know, he's a guy who can just get buckets, and on the NBA level, you need that. Like, this is a guy who might even get to 25 eventually. So in terms of offensive upside as a scorer, there's definitely a level of interest there from numerous NBA teams. In terms of the playmaking, if he brings that along, you'll be looking at a guy who could just be one of those multifaceted offensive-minded players. And, you know, NBA teams love that as well. You can get a lot of production out of those guys. So that's my top 5 right now. Of course, that can change. It's still super early. I also want to give a shout out to Sharif Cooper from Auburn, a 6'1" point guard who probably has one of the best court visions in the draft this year. He's just phenomenal, also averaging over 20 points and the 8 assists. He came onto the scene late, and he's just been a revelation. He's in the mock drafts around the web, he's slotted to go in the 20s or maybe high teens. I think that's way too late. I would be shocked if he doesn't go in the lottery. So he's a guy I want you to look at as well if you have the opportunity. So that's it for me right now, but I'll be back eventually doing more of these follow-ups because this is a super intriguing class. The 2021 draft class appears to be just ripe with talent. So that's a big boom for the NBA, and it's for observers like me, that's just great news because it means we're getting that much more talent into the league that we can enjoy.